am ravenous. I'm just so hungry, I can't take it. I hope I'm still intelligible, but this month I've read 10 books. Technically, one book is a rereading, so it's not exactly like I read it. I guess I can call it 9.5 books. I'm gonna start with the Julia Quinn novels. This month I read the Bevelstoke series. It happens in the same universe and in the same town as the Bridgerton series, but they're kind of like on the fringes. So the first is The Secret Diaries of Miss Mirander Cheever. So Miranda Cheever, her best friend Olivia Bevelstoke, has two brothers. One is a twin brother, Winston, and then the other is the older brother, like Nigel. And she fell in love with the older brother when she was 10 years old. I feel like personally the age gap is a bit unacceptable, but since she's the one doing the chasing, then okay, alright, it's romance after all. In this book, she grows up and it's time for her to look for a husband. However, she is still in love with her best friend's older brother. However, her best friend's older brother had like a horrible first marriage and has like completely given up on love and became an alcoholic and whatever. So she kind of like wins him over, and then he realizes that he might be in love with her, but he's too afraid of acknowledging that he's in love with her until she's about to give birth to his child and she's on her deathbed. Then he realizes that he's in love with her. So not the best book, not the best premise, not the best ending, but it is entertaining. This is followed by the second book, which is much better. What Happens in London. So book 2 follows the sister Olivia Bevelstoke. One day there is a new neighbor and she happens to like notice that their bedroom windows are like, you know, his is on the 2nd floor, hers is on the 3rd floor, and they are like facing each other. And then she hears from her friends rumors about a murdered fiance. Naturally, she takes an interest because she's damn busybody, right? She's super capo. So she goes and spies on him through her window, thinking that he has no idea that he's being spied on. But bruv, he went to the war. He kind of like has all the training of a national spy, except he's not a national spy. He doesn't have the stomach for it. So of course he notices that this lady with super gorgeous blonde hair is like staring down at him all the hours of the day. So he decides to like, you know, put on a show, to wear a funny hat. He will purposely like destroy papers in the fire to sort of like entertain her. And then one day they finally meet. They started out as like enemies because like he doesn't like her, she doesn't like him. But naturally they started to like each other a lot. They realized that they can like vibe with each other on the mental level. However, because Olivia is like super chill, she's being chased by this Russian prince. However, her neighbor's job given to him by the government is to spy on this Russian prince. In the end, the Russian prince is fine, and the Russian ambassador kidnaps Olivia, hoping to use her to extort money from the Russian prince, whom he thinks is still chasing her. But of course, like, the prince kind of gave up already, and the prince also acknowledges that, you know, Olivia is gonna end up with her neighbor, and then they have to like rescue her and everything, and then they get married and they live happily ever after. The third book, I don't know why, but even though the library had the physical copies for the first 2 books, the third one wasn't available. So I had to go and read it on Libby. So you can see the cover here. 10 Things I Love About You. So in this book, it follows, surprisingly, not Olivia's younger brother, possibly because he's too young to marry, but her new husband's best friend, Sebastian Grey. Sebastian, he's kind of like a playboy. He doesn't really have money. The thing is, he will have money if his horrible and rich old uncle dies, and then he will inherit the earldom and all the money and all the estates. But at the moment, he doesn't have any money and he doesn't really have any marriage prospects. So he just, like, you know, goes around having affairs with married women or good-looking widows who are still kind of young in their 20s and stuff. So that is his occupation. I'm gonna stop. I will exercise self-control. Eek! It won't close! I'm so tired! Okay. Okay, it is done. Continuing. One day, his uncle's heir dies. So his cousin And then his cousin doesn't have any sons, so his uncle, who is like a man in his what 60s 70s, basically an akong, he has taken it upon himself to try to find a fertile young new bride, because he doesn't want the earldom to fall into Sebastian's hands, because he cannot stand Sebastian. He hates Sebastian's father's choices, so he really hates his nephew. And Sebastian also kind of really hates his uncle, so they're always at loggerheads with each other. Additionally, he also has a secret. The secret is that he is actually the author of the madly popular romance series, so there's a bit of a meta over there, breaking of the fourth wall, called Miss Butterworth and the Mad Baron. I think like if you read the previous books, you will have remembered it. It was mentioned in the Bridgerton series, it was mentioned in the Smith Quartet, it was mentioned just everywhere, you know, Miss Butterworth and the Mad Baron, and all kinds of other like romance novels from this particular author called Sarah Gawley. So Sarah Gawley ended up actually being an alias for Sebastian Grey, and he just started writing because it was something that helped him cope with his insomnia. It helped him cope with his low-key PTSD from the war. And then even though everyone thinks that he's kind of like penniless and living off his friends and eating their nice food, actually he kind of has like an income of his own from writing these books. It's like his little secret. So his uncle, the horrible, lecherous, disgusting old man, he has his eye on this very young girl, like this girl that's young enough to be his granddaughter. However, he thinks that she's very fertile, first of all because she looks like a fertility goddess, it's just her body. Secondly, she's like the eldest of a family of 8, so like her father and her mother's side, they have a propensity for having large families, you know, surviving children and everything. So that is exactly what the old uncle wants. You know, he wants to ensure that whoever he marries next will be able to provide children for him, healthy children who will survive and not die of a random fever or what. So this old man, he's really disgusting. He like forces himself on her and then touches her without her permission, and then, you know, basically just treats her like an object, treats her like a whore that he can buy and sell from her parents, from her grandparents. So of course Sebastian falls in love with her, and then he realizes that he cannot go and let his uncle marry her. He needs to marry her himself. However, she is aware of the fact that her family really needs the money. She still has like 4 brothers and sisters and everything. She has to somehow marry into a family that has money enough for her to provide for her brothers. If not, her brothers won't be able to complete their education, and then her sisters will not have dowries, etc. So in a way, she's ready to sacrifice herself to be married to this horrible old man in the hopes that he dies soon, in order for her to secure some kind of a future for her family. But of course, like, you know, she's miserable about it, and then in the end she realizes that she can't go through with it, and then in the end, of course, the old man tries to force himself on her, but she fends him off. They reach some kind of a settlement with her grandmother, and then she marries Sebastian, and she figures out that, you know, he's actually the author of this romance series. And also on top of that, because he got married, he's like more secure, so it's more likely that the earldom will fall to him, so he will suddenly become very rich. So that's the story. So this is the series in its entirety. Moving on, let's talk about Singapore literature. I'll talk about these 3 next. Okay, the first one, Oh Singapore, Stories in Celebration by Catherine Lim. So Catherine Lim, she's kind of famous for writing books that romanticize Singapore's history. I hope that I am not offending anybody when I say that, but like, come on, you gotta admit it, like, you go into popular, then it's just okay. Yeah, but when I picked this book up, I didn't have high expectations. I thought that it was going to be truly in celebration of Singapore, but to my delight, it was actually extremely satirical. This entire book is just criticizing Singapore. And the best part is that when I opened it, I was like, huh? It's published under like Marshall Cavendish. You know Marshall Cavendish is what, right? It's like every time you got the TYS or like the assessment books or like the school textbooks from like your history and your geog and your bio, whatever, it's always under this. So like, I was so impressed, like she managed to publish such a biting piece of literature officially and get that government coin. I'm so impressed. I'm just so impressed. So these are the stories. My favorite is actually Kyasuism, a socio-historical cultural perspective. So what it is that it's like a fake academic essay that studies Kyasuism in Singapore. It's very funny. I laughed out loud reading it. I feel like this story encapsulates the tone of the whole collection of short stories because she takes on this kind of like external voice and then she takes it to the extreme to show how ridiculous the values that it purports are. I would like super highly recommend this book because it's very hard to choose like or to tell you what one story contains because they all criticize some aspect of, can I call it paternalism? In Singapore. She criticizes policies, she criticizes how much sway Confucianism has on our modern society. She criticizes even, you know, religion, and she just punches up. She just consistently punches up, and that is why like I really enjoyed reading this. I wish I had like my own copy. I'm considering it now. Following which, let's talk about this. The Myopic Years by someone called Pachinko. Obviously it's a pseudonym. When I went into Goodreads, there was like what, 2 reviews, one of which was saying that her friend wrote this and she was tasked with distributing it all over Singapore. This was written all the way back in 2008, and what I really liked is that this book is quintessentially Singaporean. There is no other context in which you will be able to understand this book unless you grew up here. You grew up in a school in Singapore, even if it was not a girls' school. Like, I was not from a girls' school, but I have a lot of friends who are from girls' schools, so when they tell me things, then I can kind of like match it to my experience in a co-ed school. And her protagonist went from a co-ed primary school to a secondary girls' school and then to a co-ed junior college. So this is a Bildungsroman in that we can see our protagonist grow from adolescent to young adult. She goes through a kind of like awakening in secondary school when she's surrounded only by girls, and then there are all these little things in school that you only know when you're in school. Like, when you think about it from an adult perspective, you're like, hey, this is so petty, you know? They're like seriously gossiping about this, gossiping about that. They are ostracizing a classmate who obviously has some kind of a mental issue. But then when you are there, you don't think so much about it. And her protagonist does a very good job of being in the moment. She writes in a way that brings you back to that moment when you were also like a stupid teenager who can only think about relationships. I honestly do not think that I'm speaking only for myself here. This was just very relatable. I recognize the characters that she wrote because, you know, when you go through the education system, 12 years of it, you encounter certain types of people. So I feel like, you know, when a character comes up, I can like, oh, I know somebody that was like that. Yeah. And it's just a very good and interesting but also very bittersweet experience, because even in the book itself, when she grows up and she leaves behind, like, you know, her childish years, her myopic years, which is a pun because, you know, the protagonist, she has myopia, and then there is this whole big deal about whether or not she wears specs, whether or not she wears contact, whether or not she should wear it during her CCA, which is basketball, and how like when, you know, they started mugging, they gave up wearing contacts because they can't be bothered to look good anymore. All these kind of little experiences that in a way are universal for people who study in this country, or for people who have gone through the education system in this country. It's just 100% unique read. There's nothing else like it. There really isn't. And that's why I'm so shocked by how few reviews there are about this book. I'm like, how many books out there can you say really encapsulate your school experience? Like, how many? Off the top of my head, I can remember maybe like 2. Right? Because nobody really dares to talk about things like that. And I can completely understand why she doesn't want to put her real name there. It's like, it's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of like confessional. It's like a tell-all of what she went through possibly in her girls' school. Because, well, I tell you, unless you went to a girls' school yourself, there is no way that you will know how things happen there. You will not be familiar with, like, you know, the gossip, with the drama, with the tension between like friends, between like juniors and seniors, between teachers even. Like, I guess like in your co-ed school it could be similar, but it just will not be the same. I highly recommend. I really want a hard copy of my own just to reread it at home on my own. The last Singlit book, I know it doesn't look like Singlit. The Perfect World of Mieko Sumida by someone called Clarissa Goenawan. So apparently she's born in Indonesia but she grew up in Singapore. The reviews are mixed. my feelings are also very mixed, because when I read it, I thought I didn't see this. All I saw was this, and I just borrowed it based on what I saw, which is this. And I thought that it was going to be like Japanese literature translated. That was the expectation I had going in, right? And then I went in, and then I was like, okay, so far so good. Strange that they don't want to translate gokon into like, you know, something that everyone understands, like mixer. Strange that there is no, you know, some kind of like translation guide at the back if you're going to use Japanese words wholesale there, because usually that is the convention, right? So going in, I was like, the translation is not very good. It's like kind of uneven, it's a bit patchy, it's kind of irregular. Some parts sound very native speakerish, and then some parts sound translated. So I got the suspicion that, you know, this was like affected or something. Not real lah. It's not real. Then I flipped to the front and I was like, wait a minute, that is not a Japanese name. Then I turned to the back, wait a minute, that is not a Japanese writer. And I was like, wait, she wrote this whole thing in English. She wrote it in English, but she wrote it in a translated Japanese accent. Isn't that a little bit like appropriation? That was my first thought. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a chance. You know, maybe it's like cosplay, right? But for a book. And who am I to judge somebody for cosplaying? Okay lor, cosplay lah. I mean, they colonized us, right? The least we can do is maybe make money off writing, sort of like cosplaying their literature. I don't really have an issue with that. And then I read it, and then the more I read it, the more I realized that it was very much like Haruki Murakami, in that the women characters don't have real value in and of themselves. Their value lies in their suffering and in the lessons that the male protagonist learns from her suffering. That I have an issue with. I have a strong issue with that. That is the #1 reason why I really dislike Haruki Murakami. I can like spend hours talking about what I don't like. I will take out his books one by one and tell you what I don't like about it. And to see it reflected in a book written by someone who is not a man, I was just so put off. I was so put off. And I was like, okay, you know what, I have to see it to the end. I nearly just gave up. I gave up. But I didn't have anything else to read on hand, so I just forced myself to finish reading it. And it just gets worse. Like, there is a girl, and then she's very tortured, but she's a bit like, you know, manic pixie dream girl. She's like, compared to her friends, she's not as hot, she's not as pretty, her titties are not as big. Okay, fine. She's quiet, fine. She's a bit resistant and commitment phobic, fine. But why? In the end, like, the answer is, oh, she was sexually abused by a family member. Huh? Okay, I feel that sexual assault shouldn't be a plot point. Like, nothing will make me happier than if scenes of sexual assault or sexual assault as a fact could just be completely eradicated from fiction. I don't want to see it in TV shows, I don't want to see it in anime, I don't want to see it in novels. I just don't want to see it. You know, it's just not necessary. And it's triggering. It just is. Can't believe that was her big secret. Like, you know, the big review was that she was abused at home. And that's why she committed suicide. There are better ways to write a story about like a suffering soul than to use sexual assault. It's so like Channel 8. You know, every time they want to show a character going through a character change, that trigger point is always sexual assault, which is just unacceptable. I never liked it. So yeah. So on top of that, when I realized that, then I went to like, you know, look at the book holistically again. Then I realized that like it makes the cosplaying fact even worse, right? You are trying to like bank on this sort of Japanese culture of loneliness and profound alienation, but then you ended up like using it to produce something that is so like cheap. Okay lah, I mean, I understand that this is an unpopular opinion. It is just an opinion. I still feel that, you know, we all have the right to adopt our colonizers' language and make money off it. But I think like when it comes into representing women's issues, that crossover then becomes doubly problematic. Like, I normally wouldn't have any. Oh, what was that? Okay, yeah, I didn't have so much of a problem of the fact that she was writing in like the fake translated Japanese style, until I realized that she was trying to like bank in on the tragic Japanese schoolgirl figure. So let's move on to some real translated literature. Last 4 books. Okay, the first one. I already read this. The Emissary. Okay, so Yoko Tawada has this book called The Last Children of Tokyo. I did not realize that it was the exact same book with a different title, The Emissary. And I didn't realize it until I was like maybe 6 pages in. Then I was like, every single thing in here looks very familiar. Is this deja vu? So I went to Google it. And it turns out that it's not deja vu. Like, it really is the same book. So there are 2 titles out there with the same story, published under different years. In any case, I just reread it because that was the only book I had on hand. I was desperate for something to read. And this book bears rereading. Like, there were some details that I missed out in the first part, but when I went back, I could like really appreciate it again. I could take my time taking in all those details and just really immersing myself in her dystopian futuristic world where old people are basically immortal and young people are basically gonna die anytime. Okay, next, The Honjin Murders by Seishi Yokomizo. I read his second book, The Inugami Curse. It's the same like cover style, except there were like 2 legs sticking out of the snow because that's one of the murder scenes. I felt that that book was better than this book, but this book is still pretty good. Once again, similar to the second book. To summarize the book, I can give you 3 words. Rich people problems. Yeah. So usually there's this rich family and then they have problems. And then people start dying off one by one. And then you call in the police and then the police is useless. Then you have to call in the detective. So I feel like perhaps that is like a genre of story on its own, a genre that I can enjoy. This book centers around like the locked room mystery. So the locked room mystery, as elucidated for you in the book, it's a trope. Like when you read a murder mystery, one of the tropes they use is like there is a locked room, nobody could have gotten in or out, but there is a dead body found. How did this body die? Then the detective has to like, you know, show how clever he is, that he's able to find out or like deduce exactly how the death or the murder, if it was even a murder, took place. So then our famous detective is actually like, you know, the very good friend of the father of the dead bride, and then he's invited over to come and seek justice for his daughter. So there's that. I would recommend this writer. Okay, next. One of my favorite writers, Hiromi Kawakami, People from My Neighborhood. So this book, it feels like Welcome to Night Vale, in that you think that this is just going to be a normal description of a normal neighborhood with normal people inside, but it's not. It's just whack-ass crazy. Like, there's discussions of people in this town having come from eggs instead of being born like normal people. So are they aliens? I don't know. And then there is this thing called like a pigeonitis. So everyone contracts pigeonitis. It's like a plague, or like it's a freaking bird flu. And then people started like pecking, and then their eyes got very big and round like pigeons, except for one guy who didn't contract pigeonitis, and then he gets very upset about it because, you know, everyone else got it except for him, so he feels very excluded. And then the characters inside, like, you think that they are very normal. At the start, we are introduced to like the protagonist's best friend, right? The protagonist is just a normal kind of girl. Her best friend is called Kanae. You get to read about Kanae's sister. So like Kanae, she's like very mean, right? She's like this kind of bossy little girl that's a kind of a tyrant. And then you read about how like she bullied her older sister. But then like as you read more and more and more, and then you get to hear these like very like just off the cuff recounts of what happened to Kanae, what happened to Kanae's sister. You're just like, what? I'm so confused. Like, for example, Kanae's sister, she went on a school trip, and then she has like visions and everything. So she wants to work as a fortune teller, and then one day she envisioned that there was going to be a box. So she took that box when she went on the school trip, and then inside there was like a super smelly like turnip or something like that. She brought it home, and then she like took care of it, and then the turnip grew into a man that she then married. But then like one day she received like a special message or like a vision that, you know, this turnip man that she married was going to be the guy that would save her entire town from being destroyed by a meteor. So he sacrifices his life to save the world, and then she loses her husband. And I'm just like, at what I did not see it coming. Like, the stories are just so wacky that you will not see it coming, and it's told in this very like casual, wry tone that really reminds me of Cecil Baldwin from Welcome to Night Vale, when he tells you things that are just completely absurd or just definitely 100% surreal, but he tells it in such a matter-of-fact tone as if that is simply the way the world is made. I love it. I just love it so much. Another one of my favorites. So this month is like really good because I got to read so many books that I can really say I can put in my favorites list. Yeah, this is a good book. It's a good book. I had so much fun. I just laughed out loud reading it. Okay, the last book for this month, Sweet Bean Paste by this guy called Durian Sukegawa. I don't know why his name is our national fruit, but I mean his last name is obviously Japanese lah. And then you open it, he looks Japanese lah. So that is that. I borrowed this book from my friend Kin a very long time ago. I only got to it now. Sorry, Kin. Sweet Bean Paste is talking about dorayaki. You know dorayaki, right? Dorayaki is like it looks like a clamshell, but then inside it's like red bean paste. Sometimes they can put other things, and then like the bun will have like an imprint usually, or maybe that's just the ones I eat. So dorayaki is also the one that Doraemon likes to eat. You know, right? Doraemon, you know, an totemo daisuki Doraemon, the guy with the magic pocket, you know. Doraemon is technically like a reverse Kabi. Does that make sense? Because Kabi is like everything goes in, but then Doraemon is like everything comes out. So yeah, when I think of dorayaki, I think of Doraemon. So this book is about a guy who has like a prison record, and then he's like paying off his debt by working for his old boss's dorayaki shop, and he's very miserable there. And then one day he like encounters this old woman who comes in, and then her hands are like just completely disfigured and gnarled because she had leprosy as a child. Okay, she lives in like a sanatorium that is like a bus ride on the outskirts of town. She has lived there her entire life because they basically enclosed people in that sanatorium when they had leprosy. It was basically like a leper's town, but there was still a lot of like discrimination and a lot of like misinformation about people who used to suffer from leprosy. In fact, leprosy now is like a treatable disease and it's basically gone already. Like, even people who had it, they are not carriers anymore. Like, this world is leprosy free. Also, this book says lah, right? But there's still a lot of like prejudice against people who have had leprosy, and because like, you know, leprosy it disfigures the body, right? Like, maybe if your face is affected, then bits will fall off, maybe part of your flesh will be eaten, or like half your face will be paralyzed. So this lady, this old woman, she has like, you know, the scars on her hand, but she makes the most delicious sweet bean paste. You hear this kind of story, you already know what's gonna happen. She has to die. She has to die. So obviously she dies, but before that she kind of dispenses her wisdom and everything, and she also manages to help out this teenage girl who's very estranged from her family. She's running away from home, she's trying to finish her education while also working because she needs the money, and the three of them have like struck up an unlikely friendship, and it's all over like, you know, dessert, like how making desserts is a way of living a life that is full and meaningful. Even if, let's say, you are a school dropout, you are ex-prison inmate, or you are somebody who has had leprosy. So these three people, they are definitely marginalized individuals who, you know, are kind of ejected from society in one way or another, but then they find friendship and camaraderie with each other, and they also overcome their prejudices about each other. It's definitely like a very touching book. I did get a bit like, you know, teary-eyed a little bit towards the end. Okay, so I just realized that I forgot about this book, Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. I borrowed it from a friend as well. Thanks, May, for loaning me your copy of Heaven. So this was actually like her debut novel, but it's only been recently translated, and this book is about bullying, and it's about why human beings think that it is okay to bully others or to torture them for fun. I don't really want to spoil this book for you, so if you are very familiar with her existing works already, like a Miss Ice Sandwich or Breast and Eggs, then yeah, I think that you should also give this book a shot because she writes with the same unflinching style. she really does not hold back on describing the ugliness in society, and that is something that I can really appreciate personally as a reader. I feel that every book that she writes always has a message. So yeah, this is my addendum. I forgot about it. Whoops. So I guess that makes 11 books this month. Yeah, and that is it. Let me try to get all my books in the frame. So these are the books that I read this month. The busy season has finally come to an end, so I think like in November I'll definitely be able to read a lot more. However, there's also the issue of the new Animal Crossing update, which I will definitely be very busy playing. I need to rethink my island, where I'm going to put my houses, given that now farming is going to be introduced in Animal Crossing. So I might actually end up reading less. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for watching. Thanks for waiting another month for this video. I guess I will just see you in my more regularly uploaded vlogs. Okay, bye bye.